You get me, got you. You get me, feel it, you. You get me, got you. You get me, feel it, you. You get me, got you. You get
Hello, nice to be with you. Thanks for joining us. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I am your host, Corey Nathan, and let's just get right into it. I'm changing the way that I'm doing things. I'm just like, instead of the long intro, I'm just diving right in. So, what I want to talk about, I want to pick up on something that we were talking about last week. A lot of folks were asking questions, kind of reaching out to me, and had some interesting conversations on this impetus that a lot of us feel to always be right. Or we're in conversations with friends, family, loved ones that have that same impulse to want, or just wanting to always be right. So I want to specifically talk about a few things. One, knowing, recognizing when things are getting heated, when things are just starting to get out of hand, whether you're in a in-person conversation or you're engaging with somebody via email or one, a social media thread, just recognizing it when it's happening to you or when you see somebody else starting their temperature starting to rise. Also, I've been thinking about common mistakes and understanding a lot of the mistakes that I often make and just recognizing these certain traps to avoid because they repeat themselves. These are patterns that repeat themselves. So I was thinking and kind of doing, looking into these conversations. So I wanted to share some of what I learned with you. And then most importantly, I just want to talk about how to do it all better. you know, cut right to the chase. Like, all right, here's the mistakes. Here's when things are getting heated, but how do we do this thing better? So identifying when things are getting escalated in real time, it's not easy to do because we have to constantly be checking ourselves and checking the conversations. But I can see when my own frustration starts to rise, and then I can also see if I'm paying attention and I'm really listening to somebody, not just like listening to the words that they're saying, but like trying to receive how they're being. I can see when their frustration is starting to rise. So I can also stop and take a minute and realize that sometimes I just feel like I'm being personally attacked. Like a conversation is no longer a conversation about an issue, it is a personal attack on me. So it's kind of an emotional reaction. And listen, you guys know I'm a Christian. I grew raised Jewish, and a central command is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So I don't back away from who we are as human beings. Part of who we are as human beings is we're, we have a heart, we have feelings. So, when somebody says, "Oh, you're being too emotional," nah, dude, I am being human, is what I'm being. But when the emotion is so heightened that I can no longer think, that I'm no longer tapped into, you know, um, my spiritual, who grounded in my moral, ethical moorings. When the other aspects of my humanity are overwhelmed by a heightened emotion, that is something to recognize when it's happening before it gets out of hand. And then I recognize this when certain things start happening. So if I have the urge to interrupt, or somebody is doing that with me, if I have the urge to lash out at them, or somebody's doing that with me, if I have more than anything on principle or philosophically, if I am just trying to prove a point, these are all signs that emotionally things are getting heightened to the degree that the other aspects of our human connection are no longer at work, that the emotion is suffocating everything else. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Okay? Uh, and listen, I'm not sharing that, the greatest command because I'm trying to evangelize, but it is good. I use it as a frame of reference. Anyway, that's another conversation. Maybe we'll talk about that another day. So identifying escalation in real time. Another way to do that is when I recognize that I'm being defensive. when I feel the need to explain when somebody is going on the attack, and then I feel the need to say, "Oh no, you don't understand. I'm this, I'm that, I'm this." That becomes self-centered, and it becomes I'm on the defensive, and it's not collaborative. It's no longer a conversation. And sometimes folks are just always in that mode, always in that attack mode. And frankly, that might be a sign that you're not in the conversation with the right person. Maybe that's not a subject area that you could address with that person, at least at that time. If they're, if there's an individual where I repeatedly find myself in defense mode, then it's something that maybe I'm not the right guy to be in that conversation with that individual. So recognize defensiveness, but also recognize when you're doing that to someone else. So when the person that you're talking to is trying to explain themselves or defend their positions to an adversarial degree, that's something that you can do as a favor to them to help them get out of that mode and allow the conversation to be just that, more conversational as opposed to more contentious, right? A few ways that we can do that in real time when we see it happening. When I start to interrupt someone, for example, one way, really simple way, just take a breath. So I'm kind of jumping ahead right here. I'm jumping ahead to the prescriptions, you know. So one way is simply just to take a breath. As the person is talking and explaining their point or whatever it is that they're saying, you can just pause and take a deep breath. And that disconnects that instinctive, impulsive fight or flight mode. It just disrupts that whole pattern. And it's a really helpful tool. And it's always at our disposal, unless you're drowning, unless you're literally getting choked or something. But most of the time, fortunately, that's not the case. You can literally just take a nice breath. And if that's hard to do, take another one and another one. Because a lot of times somebody's talking to you and they're just going on and on and on. And it'll take a minute for them to get their point across, or two or three. So there's plenty of opportunities for you to just and it forces you to allow them to fully explain themselves, fully try to expound on whatever point they're trying to make. And it also allows you to chill, lower your heart rate, just take a deep breath. The other thing that really worked for me and is working for me is preparing, practicing, rehearsing, but rehearsing the right thing. So, a long time ago, I had a conflict with a coworker. This is a really long time ago because I haven't actually had a boss in a long time, technically speaking. My employees are my bosses, my clients are my bosses, but technically speaking, I haven't been an employee. I've been a small business owner for so many years. So that's how long ago it was. But I still remember it because I had a conflict with a coworker, and we were supposed to have a meeting, and it wasn't for another week. We were going to have a meeting, but it wasn't for another week. And throughout the entire week, I was practicing the exact wrong thing. I was practicing some version of what was his name in the Breakfast Club? Oh gosh, I forgot his name. The dude who's like the burnout. Gosh, I forgot his name. Anyway, Bender. I think his last name, the character's last name was Bender for some reason. Anyway, he has these great 2 or 3 sentence just burns, absolute, just he nails them. The other another one that I was rehearsing was Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. Some burns. Either way, I don't really give a damn. So I was practicing some version of that where I could really burn this person. Oh, it was the worst, and it was the worst. Yeah, sure, I told her off, but it wasn't constructive. The person I was in a conflict with didn't learn anything. It wasn't edifying in any way. And I ended up getting suspended from that job for a week. It was actually one of the best things my boss did for me. It was a great teaching moment. And he's still a mentor of mine, the boss from that job. He's still a mentor of mine that I see on occasion. But yeah, so I rehearsed this, telling her off for a full week before we got into this meeting. And I told her off, and I practiced it in my head a gazillion times, during that week. got it off, and it was just it wasn't productive at all. And by the way, I didn't feel any better afterwards, you know? So nothing got done. She didn't learn anything. I didn't feel any better, and I got suspended for a week. Now, another way to do this, I had a different experience. A really good close friend of mine. We have some deep differences when it comes to some politics, in particular, some political figures, and how he sees certain things playing out and how I see certain things playing out, what our concerns are. But we're still very dear friends, very, very close friends. And what I knew that we were going out together to talk about, to finally talk about some of this stuff, because I saw that the heat was rising when he would contribute to certain threads that I was on and vice versa. And I saw that the heat on a particular set of issues was rising. And we were going out for, we were going out for drinks, and I was practicing something very different. What I was practicing was, or rehearsing in my head was, I want to be a better listener. I want to practice the disposition, like the kind of emotional, mental posture of like really receiving what this guy is saying, being able to recognize flashpoints that might have triggered me in terms of the subject matter, and being able to almost set that aside so that I could really fully understand his perspective and fully make him feel that way too. So I was practicing my mindset in a way, and my heart set in a way. And when we got together, I I did have I did communicate certain boundaries. I'm like, look, dude, this is my main objective today. I would like for you to understand me better. I'd like to be heard and understood. But if we get nothing else done, my first job today is I really want to understand. We have such a deep difference on this thing, and I'm not even going to get into it because that's kind of beside the point. But we have such a deep difference on this thing. I and I so respect you, and we're such good friends. So I just want to understand it, and I want to understand you. So, but allow me, if I'm able to communicate that, if I'm able to exhibit to you that I've really heard you and I'm starting to understand it, then if we have time, would you listen to me? And I kind of set it out that way, but again, my primary objective was really to listen to him. The conversation went great. We had a really good time. I did understand him better. The subject matter I might be talking about in future weeks, but it's a hard one. It's a hard one for a lot of people. But mostly I got to a Monty Guzman moment. Where I literally said to him, dude, I never thought of it that way. I didn't even tell him that I still there's fundamental disagreements we still have, but I understood his perspective a lot better on a really heated issue. And it colored in, because a lot of us get to a point where we're like, how can a person think that way? How can a person not see what I'm seeing? How can someone not see and be outraged at these injustices that we're seeing? And we don't get to the point of like, this is a good person. They're not a monster. They're a good person. They have their reasons. We never get to the point of actually understanding how a person can get there. They don't have our experiences. They don't read the same things that we do. But the point is, instead of me rehearsing my Jack Nicholson, I don't really give a damn what you think moment, or Bender, whatever that guy's name from Breakfast Club, one of those moments. I was rehearsing my mindset, my heart set to listen and to really understand, to practice that in that moment, to practice really, really listening. So, okay. So, identifying escalation in real time. Now, there are a number of mistakes that a lot of us make. One wonders, how can a person get to that point? And one of them, one thing that I understood is this individual got to a certain point where what was pointing him in a certain direction, what was calibrating him, what he was responding to, and then began to shape his entire mindset, was years worth of being reprimanded, preached to, what I call shoulding. People were shoulding him. Well, you should think this, and you should say that, and you're this, and you're that, and you should, and he's just tired of it. We live kind of in that era, if you will, of people shoulding on other people, you know, that people should use certain words and should think certain things, and they shouldn't use these words and those words. And a lot of them, frankly, are arbitrary. There are certain things that aren't arbitrary, but a lot of those transcend time. You know, some of them, frankly, are newer. And, listen, I didn't go to the same postdoctorate class that some folks went to study why certain words can't be used anymore or shouldn't be used anymore, and why certain mindsets or positions aren't reconcilable with what good, intelligent, thinking people are. So one thing that we can do, a common mistake that we make, is shoulding people. Imposing our enlightenment on someone else. And again, there is a difference between coming from a place of hubris, coming from a place of a kind of moral chauvinism in a way, versus versus transcendent values, shared values. It is distinct. So it's subtle sometimes, but it is distinct. But recognizing when we're falling into that trap and we're shooting on someone. Hopefully that makes sense. Another thing that a trap that I've made and others have done with me is the you always or you never. This is what, you always do this, you always say that. That's basically blaming someone, or generalizations that you're making about an individual, right? It's been done to me. I've also done it with others. Or, if you turn on the TV or podcasts or radio or what have you, you're not going to go for too long on many of these shows without hearing the phrase, this is what they do. This is what they do. Explain entire industries have been built on this is what they do. Rush Limbaugh, I don't know if Rush Limbaugh invented it, but he has a lot of copycats now. That an entire industry of people, this is what they do, telling you what Democrats, liberals, people who aren't in their version of the enlightened, the true conservative, patriotic, enlightened. This is what they do. The people outside of the true patriotic circle. This is what they do. But when folks do it with me individually, or I catch myself doing it with somebody, you always do this. You always say that. It's a blaming, kind of finger wagging, and generalizations. And maybe that individual, a lot of times that individual is making a unique individual point. So it's worth pausing before you catch yourself doing it, or pausing someone else and saying, hey, I get why you're associating this particular point that I'm trying to share with you with conversations we've had in the past, but can you hear me out? That you can pause someone else when you catch them doing it to you, but that's a common mistake that we can avoid. The other one, more generally speaking, this is what they do. It just gets my goat every time. The mischaracterizations, generalizations, and vilifications. It is it's such a common trap. It's basically, I mean, if a historian 100 years from now writes a book that defines or characterizes a lot of how a lot of these conversations have gone. It's mischaracterization, generalizations, and vilifications. I shared that story a week or two ago about how when I was at the June 14th No Kings rally, how a good friend wrote meme after meme about, oh, all those people, none of them have jobs, and these are the same people who that generalizations, mischaracterizations, and vilifications. So it bothers me, number one, because he was identifying me with somebody that a group of people that he clearly has an aversion for, in fact, hatred for, but also because he wasn't, this is about, wanting to be right. He wasn't right. There was such a wide range of people, wide range of perspectives. What we all were there protesting, we had a shared value, which is, we're in favor of our democracy. We're in favor of First Amendment rights. We're in favor of constitutional order. But there were folks that were centrist and even right of center. Again, left right is it's hard to continue using that paradigm. But there were folks who were lifelong Republicans until recent years, and there were obviously folks who are would self-identify as progressives. The young and old and veterans and just all different kinds of people. But he decided that they were all, I don't know, on the woke train or something like that. Whatever it was that he and but he was making mischaracterizations about the entire group of people, everyone there, and generalizing about everyone there in order to vilify. And that's what really bothered me is that I then was in that group of people that were vilified. So when you catch yourself mischaracterized or generalizing groups of people, and I see it all the time, all you Trumpers, all you liberals, all you, when we're generalizing that way, we're often mischaracterizing the individuals that we're addressing, whether it's in that conversation. I for I get lumped in with liberals and progressives because of two things. Because I don't hate progressives enough. I don't hate liberals and Democrats enough. That's the main reason why I get identified as a progressive or a liberal. But also because I consistently find the words, actions, character of Donald Trump to be reprehensible because I'm a Christian. I read my Bible. It's at odds with that which I believe to be virtuous, his words, actions, character. So because I see that on a daily basis, and because I communicate that, I get confused for being a liberal or a Democrat or something else. So understandable, but I just got to, point it out. But when the point here is a common mistake to avoid is when I am doing it. Or when you catch somebody that you're talking to doing it, you can point it out and say, listen, you're making a generalization that is not productive for the purposes of this conversation. In fact, that generalization is leading you to vilify entire groups of people, part of which you're associating me with. So that too is not productive for the purposes of this conversation. But the most important thing is to recognize when you're doing it yourself. When you're about to say, all you Trumpers, all you maggots, all you pejorative, all you whatever fill in the blank pejorative you want to say, all you libtards, whatever, again, when you catch yourself, you can control your own actions more than you can control anybody else's. So yeah, you can point it out when somebody else is doing it to you, but you can certainly try to recognize it when you're doing it to someone else. So the other thing is when I catch myself not listening, and how do you recognize that? When you're simply waiting for the other person to shut the hell up so you can say what you want to say, means you're not listening. An online version of this is when you read the headline and you decide to pipe up and you didn't read the article. I got to make up a word for that. That's something that just is kind of amusing about that, but really just freaking annoying. It's like, yeah, thanks for playing, dude. You saw a headline in a picture, maybe, and you decided to have a really strong opinion about it. It's clearly not an informed opinion, but you have a very strong one. In other circles, that's called just being stupid. Like, listen, I hesitate to call anyone stupid, right? And I'm not going to call the person stupid. I'm going to say what they're doing is stupid because you're acting on information. You're acting with a bold assertion based on no information. Or small bits of information. It just doesn't make any sense. But we do that in conversation as well. We hear, I don't know, we get a vibe from someone. We hear two or three words of what they say. We immediately think of what we want to say, and nothing else that they say matters because we're just waiting for them to take a breath so that we can pipe up. Then we're not listening, okay? So it's better to stay in that moment, really take in what that person is saying. They might have something interesting to say. They might have an interesting, I don't know, different perspective to consider. Or at the very least, we can reverse this trend of point, counterpoint, attack, counterattack. We can reverse this trend and literally induce a chemical reaction, a neurochemical reaction in someone that is just the opposite of what is stimulated by anger and fear. When anger and fear are stimulated, we've talked about this in the past, a neurochemical reaction happens that is like getting a hit of crack. We can do the something similar to that, but kind of the opposite of that. We can stimulate basically someone feeling heard, someone feeling loved. It's literally a neurochemical reaction that we can stimulate in someone, and that's I'd rather be associated with the latter than the former, with the love neurochemical rather than the anger and fear neurochemical. Those are the conversations that I'd rather be in. And if it means that I have to maybe wait till the next time to share my thoughts, cool. But an even more important and an even more important intention is communicated, and that is, I hear you. You're a human being. I understand. You don't have to agree, but at the very least, you could hear with the intent to better understand, right? So when you're not listening, when you're simply waiting to say what you want to say, when you pipe up on a thread without reading the article, don't be stupid. Freaking read the article. Wait till you really listen to what the person has to say. The other thing that is a common mistake is what's called ad hominem attacks. Ad hominem attacks. When you're no longer engaging on the subject matter, you're attacking the person's character. When you're saying the person is, a bad person in one way or the other for having voted a certain way, for having voted for a certain candidate, for wanting closed borders, for example. Again, not to get into the subject matter, but this is a really divisive issue right now. Someone genuinely may want, for their own reasons, to have secure borders. Okay. So if you're judging someone and saying that they're a bad person in one way or the other, any number of ways that you could describe a person's actual character and basically disqualify them from a conversation, disqualify their point simply because you disagree with them about something, you're no longer engaging on the subject matter. You're no longer having a conversation. You're attacking the very person, the very person's character. So that is definitely something to avoid. Lots of other things that, we talk generally about gaslighting. I kind of alluded to one or two. Yeah, you're too emotional to be objective about this. Or if you just completely quash what they're doing, what they're saying by saying, "Oh, that's crazy. No one thinks that." Literally, no one thinks that. Literally, no one thinks it. Well, I think it, so somebody does. Or everyone thinks this. So basically, casting someone out of polite society for having a different opinion. When you're gaslighting someone like that, making them feel crazy, making them feel so outside of the norm, or too extreme or too one-sided, that they're questioning their own merits, their own substance, their own moral framework, right? So gaslighting is a whole other subject, but basically casting someone out for even thinking a thing or saying a thing. So yeah, lots of common mistakes to avoid: blaming and generalizations, mischaracterizing, generalizing, and vilifying. When you're shooting on someone, reprimanding them, preaching at them, or when you're not listening, and then those character level attacks, those ad hominem attacks. So the most important thing, though, is what can we do about it? How can we do this whole thing better? One thing that I do a lot is I try to assess past conversations, not to the point where it's keeping me up at night, and that's a whole other, that's a whole other trap. Is when it coils for me. A lot of times something will happen, it's really upsetting, and it coils around my brain, and I'll lose sleep over it. That's not good. That's not good. Then I just need to do some meditation, uncoil from it, release that. It's not. It then becomes something dysfunctional, and not a lot of productive, constructive thought can come out of that. But if I'm able to think on prior conversations and give myself a critique of what went well, what didn't go so well, and think through how that might have gone better. Not better in terms of winning a point, or the bomb that you could have dropped on them, or the stinger that you could have, the little rhetorical grenade that you could have thrown at them. Listen, if that's your gig, great. There's a world, there's a universe of other programs you can listen to. Uh, This this ain't it. That's not what this program is about. What this program is about is figuring out how to talk about politics and religion without killing each other. Figuring out how to have important conversations on important topics in a better way, whether they're friends, family, loved ones, colleagues, whoever, even people, friends you haven't met yet, in order to make new friends, even if they're just neighbors or something that you've never talked to be able to have these conversations better. So I want to assess past conversations. What went well? What didn't go well? How could this go better in order to have more constructive dialogue with people? More conversations that don't go off the rails, where we can actually stay in the conversation and edify each other. Another way to do this better is to be clear on what your own values and goals are. If your values, if you value doing harm to someone, again, this program is just not for you. I got a text from somebody that I hadn't heard from in about a year, and we had a conflict. This isn't necessarily having to do with politics or religion. It's just a someone in my industry, and I got a text from them. I knew that we had a conflict, so the last I reached out to them was about a year ago, and I said, "Hey, listen, things didn't go well. Would love to connect. If you're up for it. If not, that's cool. I wish you all the best." Because I found myself kind of grinding my teeth over an incident that we had, in the past. So I just wanted to open up space to reconnect with this person if they wanted to. But I also wanted to open up space for myself so that I didn't continue to reside in resentment. And they never got back to me. I saw the person at an industry function, and it wasn't warm. It was pretty icy actually, but that's okay. And it hadn't heard from this person. Heard from him out of the blue about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and man, I think in years past I would have really taken it personally and what the person was saying. But what I recognized was the person was saying things with the intent to be hurtful. There was no other. It was clearly intended to make me feel bad. Certain things that the person was saying, and I didn't. I'm glad that it didn't. It didn't affect me the way that the person intended for my own sanity. But you know what it made me feel? I felt kind of bad for the person. I really did. I thought, wow, this person must be in such hurt, like the hurt that this person must have experienced in their past to want to say things to hurt another human being, the way that the intention was made clear, that the words were made clear. So it clarified my own one of my own values, and that is I don't I don't want to say things with a zero sum mentality of either I win or I lose, and either you win or you lose with no possibility of in between on these types of conversations. It's not a contest that way. So I got very clear on those values. And part of that, an outgrowth of that would be, am I saying things in order to cause pain, in order to advance my cause? Is it in order to advance my cause? Is a requirement to cause pain, mental, emotional pain on someone? So that's a clear value for me, is that I don't want to be in those interactions. Nowhere. Not even with people I don't know. That's why I avoid a lot of conversations with people I don't know, whether it's online or in person, unless there's a possibility of us connecting on a human level. So that's a possibility. But yeah, that's one of my. But get clear on your values and your goals. Maybe you do want to win. Maybe you approach these things as contests. If so, like I said, this program probably isn't for you. But my one of my goals is to understand folks better, and to, if there's something that I can offer to the people in my life, friends, relatives, neighbors, colleagues, what I'd like to offer, what I'd like to give them is that sense of being heard and understood. connecting in that way. But then also getting clear on your goals and values, you can communicate that with the people that you are in conversation with. So when you are in conversation, it's the idea of expanding the territory, expanding the territory that we both occupy, right? We both occupy this space. We both share. I refer to it so often, Fred Guttenberg and Joe Walsh, that they have shared values even on the Second Amendment, on the gun debate. They come at the legislation they support is so different, couldn't be further apart on the legislation that they support, but they realize their values on the other end of it are so similar. Their ultimate transcendent values are so similar. So you can drive at that. That could be a goal, is to understand what shared values are, right? Even if the legislation or the candidates that you support are different. So that might be one. But you can assess it for yourself and get clear on your own values and goals. But you can also talk about those shared values and goals, or at least communicate. Maybe you have different values and goals, and at least you can understand that better, right? So the other thing that we can do, I've said this before, but go easy. Go easy on yourself and on others. A lot of times I get in these conversations all the time, but I recognize that a lot of folks don't talk about this stuff all the time. So if this is the one time, in the last 6 months, year, or ever that they've had an opportunity to talk about politics or religion, they got a lot on their minds. If they're talking to me about, or maybe they don't have a lot on their mind, but a lot of people do, and they just don't have an opportunity to talk about it. So they're not going to be, it's kind of like going to the batting cages. If you haven't picked up a baseball, I'm wearing my Mets hat, by the way. If you haven't picked up a baseball bat in 20 years, 25 years, and you go to the batting cage and you're in the fast pitch one, it's going 90, 95, 100 miles an hour. You can't expect to be hitting every ball, right? You can't expect to be squaring every ball up. So it's the same thing. I am in these conversations all the time, and I'm blessed. So one of the things I love about this show is that I get to talk with people at the highest levels of their field, true experts in their field across academics and journalism, elected officials. It's been great. It's been wonderful. So I'm in conversations, and I'm preparing for conversations with these folks. But I also understand that a lot of folks I talk to at the pub, at the coffee shop, at the Bible study, online, that they're not often in these conversations. So I got to give them grace. But I also got to give myself grace, because I'm not going to, you know, Hall of Fame hitters are batting 300, which means they're failing 7 out of 10 times when they get up to bat. Same thing in these conversations. I am failing more often than not. I don't say that for effect. I say it because it's true. I say it because I mess it up more often than not. It's true. So go easy on yourself. What to do about it? Go easy on yourself and go easy on others. Give each other grace. Another thing that we can do is we can anticipate defensiveness. There are certain people, certain conversations, certain styles of communication that rub me the wrong way. And I can anticipate that based on what situation I'm going into, either to avoid them altogether. Maybe I'm just not in the right headspace to deal with it, or at least avoid those subject matters, because there are certain people I get along with and collaborate with on any number of business matters, just fun and games, whatever, but I can't talk to them about certain subjects. So that's fine too. I need to anticipate my own defensiveness. I also need to anticipate others' defensiveness. So you see a pattern emerging here, right? It's me and it's recognizing others. So it goes both ways, and recognizing that in each other. And then the other thing I can do, I alluded to before, rehearse active listening. Rehearse active, not just listening, understanding. Practice it. Prepare yourself for it. Prepare your heart for it. Prepare your mind for it. That's something to rehearse. Not the perfect one-liner, not the perfect zinger, not the perfect rhetorical grenade. Rehearse, practice, understanding. Active understanding. And that'll go a long way. So, talked about a lot. It went... I always go into these things thinking this is going to be about a 5-minute thing. We'll be over and done with. But I ended up talking and alluding to and expounding on a lot more things than I realized I would. So thanks for bearing with me. Again, what we talked about, recognize when things are going off the rails. We talked about mistakes to avoid when you're gaslighting, ad hominem attacks, when you're not listening, when you're shooting on people. When you're mischaracterizing, generalizing, and vilifying, when you get into this is what you do, blaming people and generalizing individuals, or this is what they do, mistakes to avoid, and then what to do about it. Assess your past conversations. Get clear on your values and goals. Go easy on yourself. Anticipate when you're going to be defensive or when others might be defensive. And then rehearse. Practice active listening. Practice active understanding. So that's all I got today. As always, if you dig what we're doing here, remember to follow the show, write that review, and now you can watch these conversations on YouTube. It's youtube.com/at politics and religion. That's youtube.com/at politics and religion. And I am at Corey S. Nathan. That's Corey, S as in Sam, Nathan, at Corey S. Nathan on all the socials, including Substack. We have links in the show notes, so you can find us everywhere. Seriously, though, your support really does make a difference. So thank you for all of it. Now, go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week.